Netherite trench. Gun. Additional data available.
Howdy everyone, SOB here, and now we're going to take a look at the parse from that ISE run. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I just want to just show that this ship, as you will see when I get to the build discussion, this is not an optimized build. Like, this is, in some aspects it follows some parts of the meta, but in others it deviates quite a bit. And it still did 511k in the end. Now, had those spheres not been loose at the end of that infected run, it would have done about 550, 560k, as it was holding up there quite well, and it had a good opening spike at around 1.3 to 1.4 million also. So let's take a closer look at the more detailed numbers. Mines were the top damage source. Those two mine launchers, especially with me using the dispersal pattern beta 3, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes, were really quite potent. 64k DPS just off them two mine launchers. Second, we have the torpedo point defense system. This is the console off the tier 5 Akira. And because I was spamming it at almost every opportunity I had in that run, I was able to get quite a bit of damage out of it, and in the end, it did 4.3 million damage for a DPS of about 40k. So that was a really good performer in this run. Top performer torp-wise ended up being the gravimetric torpedo, which is not really surprising. Entropic Rider, which is the temporal specialization, like tier 1 proc, did 24k. The Fekri Torment engine did 18k. And you'll see me go over some of the other abilities here when we get to the build discussion, but just in the overall, the damage from everything was quite good here. The subspatial warheads, the isolatic tears here, do perform quite worse than what you would usually see on a torp build, but that is because this is a pilot ship and not a command ship, so there's no concentrate firepower for me to really benefit from. What concentrate firepower there was here was me stealing concentrate fire procs off of someone else in the run. So that is why you see my high yield one even really showing up here, and why I have any concentrate firepower showing up in the combat log here. It's because someone else in the run was using it, and I was stealing the procs, essentially. So, with that wrapped up, let's head over to the build discussion. So, why the fleet Akira? Well, the reason for me going with this Akira was I wanted to do a more Canon-themed build that would be a bit more fun to fly, and it's themed like what you would see the ship shooting in the show. It's themed around just the concept of it shooting phasers and a ton of photon torpedoes. So that is simply the approach I went for with this. This is, every one of these TAC consoles is a photon console. So I'll just start bottom and work my way up here. Being I'm already here. So let's just go to the hangar base quick. For this, I was running the Elite Near Universe Shuttlecraft. These are off the sticks in the Mirror Strike Wing Escort. These are pretty good for DPS, and if you have them, I would say to give them a shot. Otherwise, just run whatever you are used to, whatever you want to run, really. TAC consoles. On the right here, we have the Fekri Torment engine. This is from the most recent story mission right now, and it buffs my subspatial warhead trait, which I'll talk about later, and it buffs a few other things on the builds, and it does a little bit of damage itself, as you saw in the Parse section. In that ISE, I was running 4 of these vulnerability locators for Photon, and I only swapped a few of them out for these colony consoles because I was running a Korfez and just wanted a little bit of survivability, but it's really up to you. You can run whichever combo you feel works best for you. It's really just at your discretion as to whether you want a little bit more damage or you want that little bit of survivability from those colony TAC consoles. Science consoles. The Point Defense Bombardment Warhead is from the NX, and it just gives some nice passive bonuses, and the Clicky does decent DPS. The DPRM is in a 2-piece with that Point Defense Bombardment Warhead, and I'm not even going to explain what the DPRM is, because I would hope that everyone here knows what the DPRM does. To the right of this, we have the Immolating Phaser Lance. This gives some passive phaser Cat 1 damage boost and some shield pen. That shield pen works out to be like 2-point-something% shield pen, so it's not really that huge, but it's there. And then the actual ability of this console is a Phaser Lance. So if you remember the Defiance Quantum Warhead module, this works extremely similar, except that it's a Phaser Lance. So you've got 6 charges on it. You can just fire it at targets, and you can fire it quite often. Moving up to the engineering consoles. Ferrofluid console, this is the Terran Rep one. This is really good to use if you're running multiple torps, as it reduces the shared cooldown between torpedoes. I have it in a 2-piece with the Terran Torp, which gives me a small Cat 1 projectile weapon bonus. And then I've got the Torpedo Point Defense System console, which was one of the big reasons I wanted to go with this ship specifically. This is the console off the Tier 5 variant of this ship, and it's just a really fun console to use. As you'll see in some of the footage between the ISE and then the Korfez, it's just really fun to see that thing shoot out a bunch of torpedoes at targets. And if I click on the more details of it here, it shoots out up to 48 photon torpedoes at 8 nearby targets, so 6 torpedoes per target. It's really good. And I've got it in a 2-piece with the other point defense console, the turret that comes off the Tier 3 version of the ship, I believe. And that just gives 10% crit severity and then a minor 20% Cat 1 torp damage buff. And then in the Universal Console, I've got Lorca's. This is a very potent console. It gives a lot of crit chance, but it gives a lot of shield pen. And that is why you see this console on virtually every like DPS build, and any build that wants to do elite content should really be taking advantage of the Lorca console. That is a lot of crit chance and a lot of shield pen. Devices, kinetic amplifier, deuterium surplus, subspace field mod, nothing out of the ordinary there. Experimental weapon, I believe this is off the Maquis Raider. It's not really that great of a performer, but I just felt it fit the theme of the build. And with something like this, it's all about the theme and just having that canon appearance, really. So that's why I went with this. In the aft weapon slots, I have the Gamma Rep Tier 6 Phaser Omni. This gives a little bit of a debuff when shooting foes slower than you. I then have 2 Photon Mines, a Colony one. You don't really need the Colony one. You should probably have 2 of these crafted ones that have the damage ×4 modifier. This Colony one trades off one of those damages for a proc that has like a slight chance to heal you, if I recall. It's not showing up in the tooltip there, but it's okay, but it's not really worth chasing. Shield, got the Tilly shield from the Discovery Reputation. The big thing about this, and the reason I have my shield power jacked up a little bit, is that it makes my weapons do more damage to shields. So I'm very much a fan of the shield, and I think you see it on almost every high-end build right now. For the core, I went with the Disco Rep core. Nothing fancy about this specific warp core, other than it's in a 2-piece with the Tilly shield, and gives you some hull regen, which helps with survivability. Impulse-wise, I've got the competitive rep innervated engines with the these are the ones, the innervated ones, which proc off of you hitting firing mode abilities. Deflector-wise, I've got just a Fleet Colony deflector on, nothing special there. And for the forward weapons, I decided to go with the Prolonged 2-piece just because it looked good and it performed decently well. Prolonged isn't the best performer, and if I look at the 3-piece, so I've got the 2-piece on, so I get that slight cooldown reduction, but this 3-piece makes the Prolonged Torp fire a really buffed up torpedo, essentially, but the issue is you can't really take advantage of the maximum bonus. As you'll see, even in that Korfez, I go out of Red Alert quite often, and the issue with the Prolong set is that if you go out of Red Alert while using the Prolong set, you lose the buffs that it built up while in combat. So as nice as that 3-piece could be, it's not worth it in my case. And I already said I was using the Terran Torp alongside the console. That one, it's just a decent performer. But the big one here is the Gravimetric Photon. This is the primary one I focus on. And I know it doesn't quite look, or like the effects at the end of it may not be the most canon, but this thing hits really hard, and it's really worth slotting on a build like this. I will say, though, if you're firing it with high yield, you're going to see in the Korfez, I think right at the start of Phase 2, I blow myself up with this thing because I was too close to the target I was shooting. So you really got to be careful when you're using this Torp. Okay, let's go over to stations. So you have 2 routes you could really go with this ship. You could go with the dual Oxtabat setup like I have here, where I've got 2 Oxtabat ones, and those are working alongside the 3 Oxtabat technicians I have. Or you could do a single Oxtabat plus a photonic officer, like right on this lieutenant seat. And then you could, if you did that, you could take this lieutenant that I currently have set as an engineer and turn it into whatever you wanted. You could turn it into another TAC or a Psi. So you could go either route with this. It's really at your own discretion. So I am running emergency power to engines. That's a must. That will work alongside the emergency column hologram to help with evasive maneuvers, recharge time. And then I have an emergency power to shields. I initially was running this just to help with a little bit of survivability, but also because I wanted to see if it would interact with the discovery shield. But what I found was that the Tilly shield buff here does not scale up based on what your current shield power is. It's just scaling up with what you have your shield power set at. So I was a bit disappointed to find that out. And then my last engineering ability is Let It Go. This is, I think, from a winter event. I could be wrong, but you could just Google it to see where it comes from. And it's a really potent debuff on whatever target you really hate. So I would use it on like a TAC cube. Science abilities. Tractor Beam 1. This is just triggering the unconventional systems trait right here. And so when I hit the Tractor Beam, I'm giving a 7% cooldown reduction to all of my universal consoles that are currently on cooldown. So like my DPRM, the point defense consoles, all those get a cooldown reduction off that. And then a hazard emitters 2 in the lieutenant science seat. Tactical wise, lieutenant tacticals just got chemo 1, beta 1, pretty common there. Let's start at the top on the TAC here. Mines dispersal pattern beta 3. So you could probably get more DPS with this build if you swapped this and the beta 1 around, but you know, I wanted to spam a ton of mines out with this build, just to, you know, enhance the fun aspect of it. And I'm zoomed in way too far here. Let me change render scale 1. But you see how many mines that's spammed out there? Like with the beta 3, like it spammed quite a few mines out there. And this thing can really spam out a lot of mines early on in a match, and then you can bring them over to your big targets with the relocate mines ability there. So I personally I like this beta 3 on a ship like this, just for the fun factor, really. And as you saw in the Parse, like this build performs fairly well anyways. Moving down, there's a high yield 3, and I mostly want that to work with the gravimetric torpedo. Let's see, and then I have Cannon, Scatter Volley 1, and Fire at Will 1. These will help with my survivability if I'm running colony consoles, but their primary point is to trigger the Entwined Tactical Matrices trait, which is a starship trait right here. And every time I hit Fire at Will 1 or Scatter Volley 1, it gives me a free Torpedo Spread 1. So you just saw I hit Fall 1 there and it gave me a Torp Spread. Really good trait to use. And I guess we're on traits now, let's quickly run through these. A Good Day to Die, Unconventional Systems, Intense Focus, Fleet Coordinator, Intelligence Agent Attaché. Now, this trait here, Intelligence Agent Attaché, it's really expensive right now, but if you guys wait like a month or so after this video is released, it will crash in price. It's expensive right now because it's not in the Infinity Lockbox, but it will be added probably later in like April. So it'll be really cheap here soon enough. Then I've got kinetic precision, self-modulating fire, superior projectile training, and Terran targeting systems. Those are all really just focused on, some of them are giving me shield pen, but mostly it's just your standard like DPS boosting traits here. Starship traits. Terran Goodbye off the Mir warship. This gives up to 75 accuracy rating and 15% crit chance for my weapons. Really powerful trait. It just comes from a lockbox ship, so expect to pay a lot for it. I already went over Entwined Tactical Matrices. This is off the Gagarin. Subspatial Warheads. This is off the Sona Intel Battlecruiser, and it's really a crucial trait if you want to run a torpedo build. This thing will make each of your high yields have they'll leave a subspatial tear at your target, and it does a lot of damage. All I could say is if you want to see how much damage this trait does, just go take a look at any of the record torp build runs up on ISE. You'll see that this thing does a lot of damage under the pets category. Ceaseless Momentum. This is a fairly cheap trait for feds for now until the supply runs out, but this is really crucial to any torpedo builds in my opinion. Then I went with the Ruin of Our Enemies. You could really slot whatever you want here. I was trying Exodus out for a little bit. Where's that? Exodus, Active Probat. I had tried to jam sensors and it worked, but just really run whatever damage boosting trait you can here. And then the last trait is Strike from Shadows. And this just helps with some survivability by decreasing the threat gen, but it also gives me crit chance and Cat 2 damage boost, so pretty handy. Space Rep, Crit D, Crit H. Tyler's Duality gives me a lot of crit chance based on my HP, so might be worth popping a Prototype Ablative Jevonite if you're going into a combat where you're parsing. Would just help with your survivability, but also give you more crit chance, as you will see right there. Torpedo Pre-Fire Sequence. This gives me Cat 2 torpedo damage boost and makes destructible torps faster, which helps with the high yield gravimetric. And then Omega Kinetic Shearing. The active space rep traits are the same that we were running 3-4 years ago, so. Skill tree wise, this is just a standard 27-point tack ult. I'd probably need to tune a few things with it, but something around this is what you're going to see quite often with builds now. A lot of people will max out hull capacity to get more crit chance out of Tyler's Duality. Spec-wise, Intel primary, Temporal secondary. Temporal does a fair bit of damage with Entropic Rider when using projectiles. Doffs, I already went over the 3 Oxtabats and the Emercicon hologram. I then have projectile crit severity Doff on. These are still usually fairly cheap on the exchange because they're less popular than the energy weapon variants. And then I have Sardis Kret, which is one that you very much want to have on for a Torp build, as he will have quite a potent proc there to give you up to plus 15% Cat 2 kinetic damage boost right there. And I think that wraps up the build. So let me just do a recap of the point of this build now. This build is not meant to do high damage. This build is meant to, simply be a fun build. And there are options, there are things I could do to get more damage out of this build. I could slot the ultimate console. That would be a big thing right here, I think, that most people would point out. If I had the ultimate on right now, I'd probably drop this point defense system console, and that would take my crit chance way over 50 right there. But my issue with the ultimate in a Canon build like this is that little fighter that it launches. This thing right here, which I find to be a bit annoying. And the other thing is that this is not the point of the build. This build is not intended to do high DPS. This build is a for fun build that is intended to help my immersion and simply be a Canon-ish themed Akira that fires phasers and fires photon torpedoes while still doing decent damage. And that's really the only point. I knew going into this build that this was not going to be a meta record-setting build. The ship just isn't built to be something breaking records or anything like that. So if you take anything away from this video, I would hope it would be just, just showing you don't have to follow every aspect of the meta in order to be able to do any content in the game. I mean, you're about to see me do a Korfez with this build, and Korfez is one of the hardest queues in the game. It's one of the longest queues too, and it's this ship holds its own really. So I hope you enjoy the Korfez run, and I hope you understand, this is just a fun build, and you can do weird things like this and still be able to do elite content. Not every build out there has to be a record-setting build or follow every aspect of the meta. That is something I think that some people forget when they're building ships, and there are many different approaches you can take to building a ship while still having it be viable enough to do any content in the game. So I'm going to stop talking. You all enjoy this Korfez run, and thank you for watching. The video will conclude at the end of the Korfez run. I will not be talking any further in this video.
Korfez 4 uses solar power. More than the Vaadwaur want to destroy that station. Stop them.
Stop the box. Established on a rated before our defense line. Stop the bot mark. Break through our defense line. War back. We're pushing the bot war.
Excellent work. I'll admit, I was skeptical that you and your teammates were up to the task. I'm glad you proved me wrong. I'll notify Joint Command that reinforcements would not be needed. A handful of the Alpha Quadrant's best ship commanders just saved the Korfez system.